All right, there was a little bit of a delay. You know what? And it's funny, speaking of delays, I feel like the NFL draft has been too far delayed. You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel we've gone too far, and too many takes have now become too wild. I have seen so many people go back and forth on players, on certain, like, oh, this guy's not even I can't handle it anymore. The NFL, like, right after the Masters ends, the NFL needs to do the draft, because I cannot deal with this, with all the delays, because all the hot takes are becoming too much. But you know what? We're going to get after it tonight. We've got a great guest for you. So, Sammy, let's go ahead and start the show.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast with Adam Ray.
Trying to cut it back. Justin Fields making magic happen. There goes Fields. Touchdown! The sickest Chicago Bears and fantasy football podcast. Sports entertainment like no other. It's gonna be sick.
It's Tuesday night. You know what that means? It is time for Take It to the Rank. We've got a great show for you tonight. Joining us in a matter of moments, our co-host, Carmen Vitale, and from the NFL Network and NFL.com, Chad Reuter, to talk about the draft, which I said needs to be here sooner rather than later. But I did want to let everybody know that I am a bald man, and I have made the switch recently to Manscaped to shave my head and, of course, to trim my beard. And right now, Manscaped is offering you the opportunity to save 20% when you sign up using the code SICKBEAR. That means anything you want to. Listen, it's pool season. I'm out here in the Coachella Valley, which means, you know what? You got to look nice for Coachella. We got 2 weeks of Coachella. We got Stagecoach. Manscaped.com. Go there. Not only can you get like a beard trimmer, find a thing to shave your head, they got all sorts of grooming products for you. They've got underwear, T-shirts, all sorts of stuff. Go to manscaped.com, use the code SICKBEAR, and you'll have an opportunity to save 20%. All right, joining us right now, as she always does on Tuesday nights from foxsports.com, and more importantly, the Sick Podcast, it's Carmen Vitale. Carmen, how you living?
I'm great. I'm West Coast living just like you now. So just for a little while anyway.
West Coast, best coast. It's good for you to be here on the West Coast, and I appreciate that. Sorry for the delay in getting going. Technology and me just don't often go hand in hand. But I got to ask you, I did see on Twitter today, the Beastie Boys were trending, mostly because of a trailer they were a part of with one of the Marvel movies that's coming out. I never have asked you this. Are you a Beastie Boys fan?
I am, and I was too young, I think, to internalize like when they were first like super popular. But I do remember I had this, like, before the iPod, there were other like MP3 players that were, you know, I don't know. My dad got me one, and it held like 1,000 songs, and that was like the biggest thing ever. And I remember having Beastie Boys tracks on that I would listen to with my friends in the back of the bus in grade school. So that's a fun memory, is me and the Beastie Boys.
Love it. All right, well, that's good.
Listening to things that I shouldn't be listening to.
I honestly, this is just an opportunity for you to rebuild some of the credit that you lost last week, picking every quarterback in the NFL ahead of Justin Fields. For anybody who missed if you missed last week's show, Carmen apparently has Justin Fields as the 29th ranked quarterback, just ahead of.
No, I don't. No, I don't.
I'm teasing. No, I'm joking. I'm joking, everybody. But I implore everybody, go back, listen to that show. It was a lot of fun. I thought that was one of our better shows. You might want to go check that out. But listen, I don't want to waste too much time, because it is we're going to be talking some draft right now. And I mentioned it before. He's a return guest, so this is a friend of the program now. And he's from the NFL Network. He also writes for NFL.com. He's actually LA living as well. Let's welcome back to the show Chad Reuter, who is going to be joining us here. How are you living? Where are you right now?
Yeah. I am in the NFL media building.
No way.
Yep, hanging out in the NFL media building for the next month, through the draft. So living large and really loving it.
Do they allow you on path to the draft? What's going on? What are you up to?
I help with the show, but there's plenty of people on path to the draft already. I'm good. I'm good just helping out, doing the rundown and stuff. So yeah, I'm just liking being involved in the show again.
They gave me 3 minutes the other day. That's as much as they afforded me. And then they were like asking me fantasy questions. And I'm like, listen, I wrote a full-on mock draft and I got to sit here and do fantasy takes. Like, I was not pleased, Chad. And I'm not pleased that you're not getting more of a run because you are one of the best in the business. And we appreciate you being here. You have recently, this was back on, I think it was about a week ago, about 4 days ago, your 4-round mock draft was just published. So you can go find that on NFL.com right now. It's a great read. A lot of interesting things. I do want to say this, though. Before we get to the Bears, I've seen, and I mentioned this, I sort of alluded to this in the cold open. I was kind of talking about the wild opinions I've seen about Will Anderson, where all of a sudden he's not a good player. I know that you have him going number 4 overall to the Cardinals because they trade down with, I think it was the Colts. And you're like, he's still good, right? Like, did I miss something? Like, what's going on?
He's still good. Look, you are absolutely correct in the fact that there are, 8 weeks between the end of the combine and the draft is just way too long. And you can't, like, I do 4 mock drafts and I can't have the same people in the same spots in all 4 mock drafts, right? You have to mix it up somehow. Plus, there are so many
things change. Well, the first time you did, the last one you did, I mean, the Bears were still the number 1 pick. So, yeah, right. Of course, you got to change some things up.
You got to change it up. And even a guy and the other thing is that every player has a draft range. So I would say Will Anderson's draft range is from 3, if the Cardinals stay at 3, to like 7. So there's a lot of spaces in between there that he could go, and nothing because he didn't do anything, but some teams just happen to like, let's just say Jalen Carter doesn't fall too far. Some teams may like him. Some teams may love what they see from, Tyree Wilson from Texas Tech in terms of what they want in edge. So sometimes it's more team scheme fits, and preference rather than a guy is, good or great. It's just sometimes guys just go in an area, maybe not at 3, but maybe at 7. So, and I think there are some people have concerns that he's not the bendiest edge of all time. And, he didn't have as good of a year this year as he did the year before, things like that. But overall, I think he's a fantastic player. He's going to be a really good pro. And, a lot of things are just being overthought right now.
A little bit. Well, they're now starting to talk like he's not like, oh, he's a tier 3 guy or anything like that. And
no, that's one person. That's one person is saying that. And that was like the first thing I did when I saw it was I sent it to a bunch of I was like, are we kidding? What are we doing here?
Look, a lot of people are covering the draft now, which is great because, it's a great event. It's a lot of fun. And the more people cover it, the more interest it gets. And the better I am staying employed. So I'm all good with it. And I think, and look, everybody has different opinions on players, and you're going to get different opinions, certainly on quarterbacks and all that stuff. And it's great. I mean, look, we'll find out in a month. And then, sometimes you step out on a limb like that, and 2 years from now, that limb looks pretty strong. We'll have to see once Anderson's picked and what he does. And, we'll see how that tier 3 evaluation looks.
I think people just want to make a name for themselves, and like I'm one to talk, but still, that was a little bit too far. But before we get to the Bears, though, I do want to say Lucas Van Ness, you had going to the Lions. Could they be in the mix for a cornerback though, even with Okudah, with the trade they made today?
Yeah. Okudah is now Hakuna Matata. He's out of town, so I think. God. I think
I was wondering which one of you was going to make that joke, quite honestly.
Yeah, so he's out now. And I think they're in the mix. They were sort of anyway because even though they signed Emmanuel Mosley,
I thought so.
A 1-year deal, and he's coming off injury. They signed Cam Sutton, but he can play nickel. Yeah. They still need guys outside. So I think they were sort of in the mix for it anyway. But now definitely, you're looking at Christian Gonzalez from Oregon. Joey Porter, if they like him out of Penn State.
That's okay. Now you had him as the top cornerback off the board.
Well, he just really fits what Seattle wants. And this gets back to what I was saying about team preference and scheme, right? So like if you look at Joey Porter, tall, long, fast, you're talking about a Seahawks corner. So that's the reason I don't know that I'd put him on anybody else in the top 10, but potentially Detroit. But I think they would go with a Christian Gonzalez if they wanted to get a cornerback that high. And the other thing is they have that second pick later in the first round, and they could get a corner at that spot. So I'm sort of leaning back towards Jalen Carter at that spot after this trade. So we'll see.
That's a perfect lead-in because you mentioned Jalen Carter. If Seattle doesn't take him, then the Lions don't take him. You, in your mock draft, have the Bears taking him.
Yeah.
Which is hysterical, just given the fact that before they traded the first overall pick, this was a conversation that was had. So
right.
Explain to me that. Talk to me about that.
It's just a matter of
he's going to drop.
Yeah, I mean, there's risk involved with him, and we've seen this in the past with guys like Albert Haynesworth, Nick Fairley out of Auburn. Sometimes these guys just drop a little bit more. I think Carter's a little too talented to get out of the top 10. If the Bears don't take him, the Eagles will take him, or maybe the Jets move up from 13 to 10 to take him. I think he's going to go in the top 10 overall. But look, the Bears need a dominating interior presence, and really Carter has a real opportunity to do that. You just hope he matures. And look, he's been through a lot this offseason. And whenever for those that have been in something like that, where even though you didn't cause a death, you were part of an incident where somebody passed away, that is difficult to deal with mentally. So I think he's got a real chance to be a great NFL player. You plug him in Chicago, say thank you very much for the great value in this player, and we're going to wreck the NFC North.
Would it be a red flag, though, if the Lions and the Seahawks pass on him? Because those are two programs, I think, that could embrace a player like Jalen Carter. Carmen and I have talked about this before. Like, if those two teams are like, yeah, we're out, it seems like a huge risk for the Bears at that point.
Well, you have to remember, last year, the Seahawks did business a little differently. And John Schneider's talked about this, their general manager, that he reevaluated the way he was handling the draft before last year. And they took, things like character and not looking at need as much very seriously last year. So I think if that's still the case, I think they can pass on Carter and still meet one of their other needs. I mean, I think they literally can just go with a guy that they really like the best, and maybe it will be Carter. But I don't think they're not, since the Malik McDowell episode that they handled. I can't see them taking Carter after what happened with McDowell and his issues.
That was something that I brought up earlier too, because the Bears have stressed, and Ryan Poles in particular, since he's gotten there, has stressed character, and that's really important to them, and that building a culture, this new culture at the Bears, is contingent on getting guys of high character. So when this all went down, I was like, I don't know if this keeps Jalen Carter on the table for the Bears either, for that same reason. But they do have maybe such ridiculous need at that 3-tech spot that Jalen Carter would be perfect for.
Every GM, every coach talks about culture and character until a guy becomes such a great value that they say, look, at this point, we have to do it. And you know what? You see teams like the Chiefs are a great example of this. They are willing to take guys that other teams aren't willing to take because they're willing to take on some risk. And at some point, you get to that point, and they've got some great players out of it, whether it's because of a size issue, or because of off-field stuff. They're willing to take guys, and they become really good players because they worry about how good they are in the field and not some of this other stuff. As long as they're, as long as you're not overpaying for them, as long as you get the value at a good spot. So, look, the Bears may be another team that isn't willing to take them. That's true. But just like at 9 or 10, you have to pull the trigger on this guy.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
And Ryan Poles comes from the Kansas City Chiefs and has obviously dealt with this before. So if there is there's something about a similarity or some sort of familiarity, Ryan Poles does have that example, the Philadelphia Eagles, where Ian Cunningham has come from too. That makes a lot of sense. So, okay, fine. We'll take Jalen Carter. I have no problem with that. One player that we have been advocating, the Bears take a look at. And listen, I'm not saying that this is the biggest need for the Bears, but I really like Jackson Smith and Jigba. You have him going to the Green Bay Packers, and I guess my question to you is, what have I done to hurt you? What did I do?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, man. I think he's going to be teams, it's interesting because for a while we were like, well, he had that hamstring injury all year. Is he going to be able to stay healthy? But I think teams are going back to his 2 years ago tape when he basically told, like he got on the field as a freshman and Jameson Williams had to leave town because he couldn't get on the field at Ohio State, right? So he went to Alabama and blew up there. Well, Smith and Jigba was the reason he couldn't get on the field. And he's so good. So if they took him at 9, I would, I'd be all for it. I think he's an excellent player. A lot of people say there's not a true number 1 guy. I think this guy in 2 years is going to be the guy we're talking about among the receivers. So, hey, if they went that direction, wouldn't blame him one bit.
I just think it would be so petty and wonderful if the Packers, like when Aaron Rodgers finally leaves, they take a receiver in the first round. Well,
it's going to be a receiver.
Hats off to
Yep.
Rudy and the Petty Kings.
Look, it's all a matter of value. They would have loved to have taken. Well, look, they traded up for Christian Watson last year.
They did. They did.
In a couple of years ago, they could have taken T. Higgins, but they took Jordan Love because Aaron Rodgers is like day to day, permanently. So you don't know what he was doing. So they, and it's going to be funny because in this mock draft I had them taking a receiver, a tight end, and then another receiver. And if that happens, people are just going to go nuts. They're like, why didn't you do that with Rodgers? Well, just how the board plays.
And it would be funny, too, that
how the board plays.
It would be great, though, because Jameson Williams got chased out of Ohio State, and now he's with the Lions. And then the Packers take him, and then he goes on to be a Pro Bowler or an All-Pro. And then once again, it's starting all over, and the poor Lions fans can't catch a break. But that would be the way that would go.
Yeah, and I think Packers would be looking at either receiver or tight end in that spot. So if Smith and Jigba goes to Chicago, goes to Tennessee, goes to Houston, Dalton Kincaid probably from
Dalton Kincaid, that's what I was thinking.
Would be a pick there. So either way, Jordan Love's going to get some love.
Well, I want to bring it back to the Bears because I get enough. I'm usually the one talking about other teams in the division. So I'm going to pull a solid here, guys, and I'm going to go back to the Bears. Because you had in your first mock, you had the Bears moving back into the first round. Right. And this time around, you didn't do it. So what was the thought process? Why did you change it around? Do you think that's still a possibility with all of the capital that they have?
You know what? There are so many possibilities in a draft that I try to give as many examples of things that could happen as I can through the different mock drafts. If they really think, and I think that might have been before the DJ Moore trade.
I think so.
Yeah, I think that was before that. So that's another thing that kind of, maybe they won't move up for a guy like that. And if they get a receiver in the second round without having to trade up, I think is where I was going with that for the most part. But there are so many teams could trade up into the late first round this year for a quarterback, for one of the wide receivers that maybe falls a little bit further than expected, for one of the edge rushers. So, I think the Bears are certainly in a position. Well, now that they've lost that pick, right? They traded that as part of the deal, unless I'm screwed up in the head now. So now they don't even have they still have 53, but that's a long way to that's a long way to trade up from 53. So,
right.
It's tougher down there. So but that said, a lot of teams trade up in the first 5 or 6 picks of the second round. And they're certainly in some conversation if they decide they want another receiver or something like that, and they don't go with JSN in the top 10. I think there's Quentin Johnson, TCU, could be available early in the second round. Jonathan Mingo from Ole Miss. So there's plenty of guys that they could still and the Rams are probably trying to they probably put out billboards and stuff asking other teams to trade into their 36th spot because they have so few, they don't have enough 3rd and 4th round picks because they've traded them all. So, look at 36 for the Rams. They're going to trade with somebody, whether it's the Bears, the Patriots, or somebody.
Yeah, there's signs right out of SoFi Stadium, right to your right over there.
Right.
They've got signs up saying, please. Once they took down the Roman Reigns and Cody Rhodes signs, the Rams were up there advertising their pick. You do have – so the Bears essentially have 3 second-round picks because I'm following the logic because somebody started this thing about like, well, the Steelers essentially have a first-round pick because the Bears gave up the 32nd pick, which is, in a lot of years, which, again, like, I love when people talk about this online, and it just drives me crazy. And they're like, it's not essentially a first-round pick. They're like, well, the only thing that's missing is the 5th-year option. I'm like, that's a huge part of it. Yeah, that's why the first-round pick is
club control for another year.
That is the biggest part of it, and you guys are brushing it off. Like, God, I'm like, yeah, whatever. Then, like, every year, the 33rd pick is essentially a first-round pick. Like, stop with the semantics. The Bears have the first pick of the 3rd round. I don't think of that as essentially a second-round pick. I think it's a 3rd-round pick. I just do. We talk about it's going to be on Friday night.
I have been saying for many years that exactly what you're saying. I mean, I would mention the 5th-round option, but in reality, when you look over the history of the draft, really when you're talking about from, the 54th, 55th pick into the 70s, they're very similar value. So in the case like Chicago at 64, you're really getting a very similar player than even 50. It might be interesting, like how 53 versus 64 even plays out this year. Are you outside of that tier of talent? But I think 53 might still fit in there. So, that might not be the case for them this year. They might get a really good player at 53. And then at 64, it's more of a guy that you hope starts, but, is more of a rotation guy. So they're right on the cusp of that this year.
Well, your 53rd guy was Tyreek Stevenson out of Miami, and our own Lance Zierlein compared him. And usually when Lance does these comparisons, it drives you crazy. He's like, his pro comp is James Wiggle. You're like a player you've never heard of. And you're like, thanks, Lance. That was of no help. But he actually compared Stevenson to James Bradbury, where you're like, what? Which I love. Do you think that this is is this just addressing a need, or is this like the best player available?
I think at some point in the draft, you really, once you're outside the top 20, it's really fuzzy line between what's the best available player and what teams' needs are, because in reality, there are 10 guys of equal value that they could take at that pick. And so you have to pick from a smorgasbord, a plethora of needs, right? So you can't, they're picking a place of need, but you're also picking maybe one of the top 2 or 3, the top guy on your board, but the needs are baked into the board a little bit. So like, they're not going to take a quarterback there, right? So it's like, so I think Stevenson can meet a need for them. It may not be like their top need, according to some people, but Stevenson's a really good player. He's going to be a really solid. And look, I don't know, maybe Kindle Vildor is going to be awesome. I don't know, but I think they could use some more bodies at that spot. And I think he's a really good value. He could go in the 40s somewhere. Again, they're right on the cusp of that, getting that guy that could be a top 50 pick, even at 53.
It's interesting because actually in my last mock for Fox Sports, I had the Bears taking a corner with the number 9 pick, because from people I've talked to, especially around the league, evaluators, scouts, coaches, there seems to be a sentiment among those guys that this cornerback class it's deep, sure, but there's like 2 or 3 top guys, and then there's a huge gap. And so if you want an actual lockdown corner, which the Bears do still need, you still need to add to that outside rotation a little bit more. You're going to need to spend some pretty hefty capital or a rich pick on a corner if you want that kind of production. Or do you? I mean, this is just kind of what I've heard, but I don't know if that's kind of the sentiment that you've seen or how you've evaluated these guys.
I was just talking about that today in terms of whether there's going to be 3 corners taken in the top 10 this year. Hasn't happened since 2005, so it's been a while. But some people like Devin Witherspoon enough to put him in the same category as Porter and Gonzalez. I'm not in that group. I think he's a really good mid first round pick. So I think that's where he'll probably go. But some people like him more than that. I think that's possible. But again, it's just one of those situations. And like, look, if Gonzalez, if Carter's gone, if they don't want to go with Smith and Jigba, and they're like, hey, Christian Gonzalez is on the board, let's take him.
Yeah.
There's a great option there for them, because I think Gonzalez is fantastic, ball skills and athleticism and all that stuff. So you can't go wrong picking that guy at 9.
Yeah, to me, I feel. I'm sorry, come.
No, go. I was going to move on.
No, but
you got something else to say.
No, I was going to add to that, because I feel, as much as like everybody's they're in a certain camp of like, there's people like they were like, let's go with Jackson Smith and Jigba, who, by the way, Steve Smith says is the best receiver in this draft.
Yeah.
There's obviously the people who think the offensive lineman could be a thing. And if Jalen Carter is not available, I think we all kind of settle on like, yeah, Jalen Carter if he's there. But if not, like the tackle or somebody like that, and going in that spot. So it's interesting, because I think that there's a bigger variety than a lot of people are giving that.
For sure. Paris Johnson would be a great pick for them. And even if they don't play him at tackle, they said, okay, we got Braxton Jones, we're good there. They want to see him develop. Paris Johnson was an excellent guard before he moved to tackle at Ohio State. So if they wanted to play him at guard, move Whitehair into center, that's definitely in the cards. Of course, Peter Skoronski is the same situation. They could use that pick on him and really build that line for Fields. And that's so important, I think, for his development.
But they signed Nate Davis from Tennessee, who's expected to play right guard now, and Tevin Jenkins is expected, or was reported earlier this week, that he's going to switch to left guard. So I feel like the guard positions is where the Bears are really.
If they're going to play Tevin, if they're going to play Jenkins at left guard, then you could put Paris Johnson at right tackle, right? I mean, I think you could play 100%. Him either.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think, but to be honest, like anyway, whatever. It's so funny, like. A lot of the offensive linemen nowadays are becoming so versatile, and just because there's so many injuries up front. And I think Paris Johnson's one of those guys that could fill in multiple spaces. He would be the equivalent of the Packers' Elgin Jenkins, basically. Mm-hmm. He's a first-round version of that. So I think he would be a great pick for them, even if they decide to move. Look, they may get those guys in camp, and they may see how Jenkins does at guard, how Paris does at tackle and all that, and they may move it around, right? I mean, they had to shift everything around last year. They may do it again this year and say, you know what, Jenkins belongs at tackle. We'll put Paris. They'll figure it out. Get 5 guys. You'll figure it out.
The best 5. Yeah, I'm very much on record saying that keep a guy at his natural position, because it's not as easy as we make it out to be. And then just the sliding in from tackle to guard is a little bit more of an easier thing, I think, than switching sides entirely, because then you're working against all of your muscle memory. And I've gone on and on about this a bajillion times. And the guys that can do it fluently, like Elgin Jenkins can do, like, that is so impressive to me. But I really do think that you try and draft. If you're drafting a guy, you're going to try and keep him at least at his natural position. But say the board doesn't fall that way, and they do take a tackle with the first pick, and then you still need to add to the receiver group, I think, a little bit more. So later round prospects, receiver wise, we've heard it's not a hugely good receiver class. What about guys like Rashee Wright? Or Rashee Rice, rather. Guys like that you could be available in the mid rounds. Where do you think he goes? What's a good kind of range for him?
I'm getting my 7th round ready to go, right? And right now, sitting in front of me, I have pick 61, Chicago, Rashee Rice, SMU.
Okay. I saw that.
Hey.
So that's where I'm looking at, and I think he's in that. He should be a top 50 pick, in my opinion. He may fall out of that. He's got a lot of like Justin Jefferson type game to him, because he's underratedly fast. He doesn't have to play the slot. He can play outsider in the slot, great after the catch. So if the Bears decide not to go receiver early, they could get one 2nd or 3rd round. There's enough depth at that position, even though it's kind of a quote down year. It's really more of an average year. And in the last couple of years have been above average years. So you can still get some pretty good guys in the second or third round. And I think Rice would be a great fit. Josh Downs from North Carolina, if you want more of a slot guy. Marvin Mims from Oklahoma, who is criminally underrated. But he's going to be one of these guys like Emmanuel Sanders that gets picked in the third round, and he's going to get there, and people are going to be like, why did he go in the third round? Well, he's 170 pounds soaking wet. Fine. But he's really good. So they get Mims, they get one of these guys in the second round. They'll be fine.
Yeah, I like that Rashee Rice because I feel like in one of your previous mock drafts, you had the Bears taking Rashee Rice earlier. This would be an end of the second round pick. The top of the third round, speaking of the top of the third round, essentially a second round pick. But Steve Avila out of TCU, who is a guy who I absolutely love. I think that he is a great player. But like you said, he's a guard. But like I know that we're talking about this again of like all these guys have versatility. He feels like a guard to me. What would the Bears do? I know you're talking about like getting the five best. But is this just he would be way too good of a value to pass up at that spot?
That's right. And he may go much earlier. I might have him going to like the Saints at 40 in the next version, right? I mean, like I said, there are draft ranges.
We'll keep him. No, you don't.
Yeah, right. There are draft ranges for these guys, and they can go a little bit later than people think or a little bit earlier. But anyway, so he's a great value. I think he's going to play center for somebody. So he sort of, as a guard, reminds me of Will Hernandez. If you want to play him at guard, and that hasn't been great. And I think he can.
But he was a good prospect coming out.
Right, as a prospect coming out, he sort of reminds me of that. But I think a team who really wants a solid center might look at him like an Arizona or the Saints, and certainly the Bears would be in that conversation. He may end up going earlier than what I had on that, so he may not be available. But if he was, I think they should jump all over him. I want to get back to your point about the lineman switching.
No, but bouncing around though. I'm sorry, I'm going to be bouncing around here for a little bit because later on you have the Bears passing on Luke Whippler out of Ohio State. But if you have Avila, that I don't think that you need, then of course they would probably draft him with the idea of him playing center. I get it now. I see the puzzle now.
Well, and Avila, if they want to make, again, this was before Tevin Jenkins, if they're going to move him to guard, I'm just saying, like, if they were going to play Jenkins at right tackle and move Whitehair into center, then they would have an open guard spot. And that's what I was thinking about Avila when I submitted the mock too. So it just depends on what they want to do. And Carmen, I agree with you in principle, but a guy like Paris Johnson, for example, switched from right guard to left tackle without an issue. So guys that can do it, it's awesome. And not everybody can do it. You're right. And some guys struggle with it. So you have to take that into consideration.
I just think that, especially in his first, I feel like you need to draft him and you need to get him into a camp at his position you want him to play at the very least. Like, he can be versatile in college and all that other stuff, but I do feel like there's a learning curve with offensive linemen that doesn't – the game is just completely different for them down in the college level. But like Steve Avila, though, I know that TCU, didn't do very well as far as the national championship goes.
Well,
but if you watch –
that was rough.
But if you watch Steve Avila in that game, which I have, like, he held it down. He had a fantastic game. I mean, this is a guy that I believe, if I was reading this correctly, didn't allow a sack his last season at TCU.
He's a brick wall.
Like, I think that he's much better than, and to your point, then I think that means he probably goes higher than the third round. And he seems like a great guy.
In the case, again, not every player that we think is going to go in the top 50 goes in the top 50. There's always surprises in terms of guys that are falling into the early third round. Like, how did that happen? So I account for that in some of my mock drafts because, things change a lot, and then guys don't go as high as some people think. So he's one of those guys that I'm like, well, he's not a great athlete. And, some teams are more interested in mobile linemen rather than guys that are a brick wall.
Team dependent,
team fit and all that stuff. So especially with centers and guards, since there's only one or two taken in every round, if they don't go, then they may have to wait an extra round from where we thought they were going to go.
Yeah, it's true. It's so hard to gauge, but I do feel like, Ryan Poles is a very good evaluator of offensive line talent, and he knows he has a vision for this unit. Of any unit, he has a vision for this unit. But the guys that, these guys are in front of the backfield now, with David Montgomery gone, you have Kendre Miller going to the Bears. And they have this already like running back by committee type deal. Like, do you throw another guy in that mix, or like what? Yeah, okay, all right, let's do
absolutely
it.
because
running backs, let's do it.
You need 3 running backs, in my opinion, in the league. Even though and not like 3 power backs, but you need guys that can catch out of the backfield, that have explosive ability. And honestly, I'm not going to be shocked if they name Bijan Robinson their first pick. I really won't. In fact, I did that. I did that in my first mock. And people got upset. But look, we're getting to positionless football. And when you have a running back, in terms of a running back, receiver, tight end, receivers are taking handoffs. Tight ends are taking handoffs. They're running quarterback sneaks. Running backs can get out in the backfield. When you have special playmakers, you incorporate them into your offense. And I think Bijan's going to be a special playmaker. And if you put him and Fields and DJ Moore and additional weapons, that's just going to make Fields even better. So I didn't do that this time, but don't be shocked if that happens. But even if they don't go that high, I think in rounds 2 or 3, they're certainly going to be looking at another guy to add to that mix to make sure they can keep that position healthy and support Justin Fields, not just in a running game, but out of the backfield.
But out of the back, I think that's a priority too. We've talked about that as well. A guy that can be a factor in the short game, helping Fields get the ball out quick, and because they don't really have a guy that's super comfortable doing that on the roster right now.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead, Chad.
No, I was just going to say, this is another situation where a lot of people have their opinions on what a team should do. And if what the team doesn't match their opinion, then it's no good. Or, like if you bring it up in a mock draft, then, I don't agree with that opinion. That means that you're stupid, right? Bijan's one of those guys that I could see a team, Arizona going early, the Bears, Philadelphia going early. Somebody's going to take him and people are going to go nuts. And then when they see him on the field, they'll be like, "Oh, what a great pick!" So
that wasn't that bad of a I could see that. I don't know. I still have Cedric Benson flashbacks, so forgive me.
I get it.
I know, like whatever. It's just dumb. But I want to talk about the final pick in the 4th round. I'm going to jump ahead. Sorry, Carmen. Colt, because I wrote the name wrong in the rundown, so I want to. Colby Wooden.
Oh, I got it. I knew who you were talking about.
Okay, I think I wrote Carmen. I might have actually wrote your first name.
You did.
Which seems like me.
It's a gender ambiguous name. It's a gender ambiguous
little bit,
name.
like either one, and so and a pass rusher out of Auburn who Lance compared to who was it? Tyrone Crawford, I think it was, the Cowboys. A guy who played like a legit, like, again, I know it's not like as great as James Bradbury, but like Tyrone Crawford played a lot of years for the Cowboys. Like that seems like a solid enough pick for the Bears.
Yeah, absolutely. If you can get a guy who's that size, who you can play inside and outside a little bit, depending on your scheme fit. I think he's just a solid player, really, 4th round pick. And so I think you just continue to build the lines, right? I mean, you can never have too many pass rushers, too many defensive linemen to get in that rotation and do their thing. So Wooden isn't like the most explosive guy. He's not the bendiest guy, but he's a strong player and he's got enough athleticism where he's going to stick in the league for a long time.
What do you mean by bendiest? Describe that? I hear that a lot. Like he can't he can't bend down to pick up something, like he drops a piece of paper. He can't bend down. What does that mean?
Well, sort of. So you see a defensive end trying to get around a tackle, and in order to do that, they often have to bend down. So almost like their hand could touch the ground as they're going on. And one of the drills that they do at the combine that people might have been seeing is that they put a couple of hula hoops out, and you have to bend down, pick up the towel on the run around, and put the towel back down, and just keep, like you're bending your body to the side, because you got to be able to turn the corner. It's all about turning the corner against an offensive tackle to get to the quarterback. So, but you don't have to do that to be a very good pass rusher. You can overwhelm tackles with speed. You can get secondary rush with power and leverage against that guy, push him back into the quarterback, and then swallow the guy when you get there. So there's a lot of different ways to get a pass rush. And Wooden's more in that category than like a really flexible guy that can come off the edge with speed and all that stuff. So it just depends on what you're looking for. And if you're playing more 3-man fronts, he's got the strength to hold up 1v1 against tackle on the edge, play the run, and free up linebackers. I mean, I think he can do a lot of different things. So he's going to be a valuable guy up front.
Bendy, like when you're describing that, I'm thinking of like when I'm trying to grab one of my toddlers or my toddler. I only have one toddler now, but like trying to grab the toddler when he's trying to get away from me, just having that bendability. Like, that son of a gun.
Yep.
Yeah. No, that's a drill that they continue into practices, at least when I was, with the Bucks and stuff. That was a very standard defensive lineman, outside linebacker drill, rather, where, it was a 2 hula hoops, and you picked up the towel in one as you bend, and then you came around the other side and you had to put it back down. And there were guys that couldn't do it, but it wasn't indicative of necessarily their ability in the pass rush. It was just indicative of the fact that that's not how they were going to win.
Right.
But they still tried anyway. But there's, like Chad was just saying, there's so many different pass rush moves. There's so many different ways to manipulate leverage. And that's just one of them, especially if you can get around a hulking left tackle. But there are, if you're strong enough to do that, go for it. No one's going to stop.
And the thing is, like, everybody wants the super flexible edge, right? But the fact is, it is so hard to beat these tackles, especially within like 2.5 seconds when the ball's out. Yeah. So, they're
more athletic these days too.
Right. You get pushed around like Orlando Brown can barely move. All he's got to do is push that little end around the corner, right? And the quarterback steps up and there. So if you got a guy with more strength, he can push Brown a little bit and similar guys like that into the backfield and make life really difficult for quarterbacks, make them claustrophobic. And sometimes that can result in interceptions and other things that maybe the sack numbers don't, indicate.
Yeah. Think of like prime JPP. That was he was like the bendiest like guy I've ever seen. Prime JPP is bendy.
Yeah, Will McDonald in this class from Iowa State is pretty thin, but he's very, very, he can really get around the corner. So he's going to be valued somewhere in the top 40, 45 picks because of that.
I love it. I also like the mock. If I can go through this one more time, Jalen Carter falling at number 9 for the Chicago Bears, followed by Tyreek Stevenson in the second round picks of Tyreek Stevenson, Rashee Rice, Steve Avila at the top of the third round, followed by Kendry Miller, Colby Wooden. I think that would be a pretty solid class, and I think that checks a lot of boxes. Get some offensive linemen, get some help on the defensive line. When you look at the Bears right now, when you're making these evaluations, and again, we talked about corner being a possibility. What do you think's the biggest need for the Bears? Because I think I'm starting, and again, this might go to the fact that, the draft process stretches out too long. But what is the biggest need? Do you think it's defensive line or offensive line, or what do you think the biggest need for the Bears is heading into this draft?
I still think you got to build that offensive line in front of Fields. I really do. I think that's the key to his development. And then, you could use some more skill players as well to help him out, but they've done some of that in the offseason. But building that line, I think, is the key. And I think it's the key for most teams, to be honest. You can have the prettiest looking Ferrari in your driveway, but if that engine ain't working, that 5-piston engine in the front ain't working, you might as well put it up on blocks in your driveway. Because, it doesn't do anything. So I think you get another offensive lineman and you make sure that Fields is well protected and also is able to give him a run game. Not only when he takes off and runs, but when other guys are getting the run in the backfield. I just think that's the crucial part for this team if they're going to take on the, try to win the NFC North this year.
Yeah, that was one of the biggest things, when they brought in looking at the Bears when they brought in Deontay Foreman, who had 5 100-yard rushing games last year. The Bears had 5 in total, but 3 of them came from Justin Fields. So you do want them to have the ability of your running back to go out there and make something happen. All right, we're like 3/4 of the way through the show. We haven't taken a single question. So I'm sure Sammy has some lined up for us. And apologies to me, and apologies for having to put on my glasses. Would you guys be happy if the Bears traded down again in the first round? And what are the odds of it happening? I did read some things today that the Bears are in conversations with perhaps the Pittsburgh Steelers, who want to jump up from 17 to get into the top 10. To me, that would cost a lot. Like, it's not.
Yeah.
Like, I know the Steeler fans act like, well, we'll just give you your second round pick back and we'll call it a day. I'm like, no. It's not going to work that way. But do you think it's possible that the Bears could trade back?
Yes, it's definitely possible. And I think what you're looking, one thing that might be very interesting is if a team is looking for a quarterback that has fallen into that area. I'm just kind of looking to see what they'd have to give up. I think really what they'd have to give, like if Steelers wanted to move up, you're talking about more than that second round pick. You would have to get that second round pick plus maybe a conditional pick next year, or like a third round pick next year or something like that. That's what I would ask for, because I want this to translate into multiple years. But yeah, I think so. The 9 spot isn't one of the more traded spots in the first round. The 10 spot seems to be the hot spot, because you get out of that elite group and it can be 8 or 9 players. So depending on how the board falls, they could be in a situation like, look, the Steelers, the Jets, somebody that's willing to take on Jalen Carter, for example. And if the Bears don't want anything to do with them, that would be a great place for them to pick up some more draft capital. So I think it's a decent chance, but the 9 spot is not one that's traded out of. So that's why I haven't really projected that, but there's certainly a chance.
And remember, a couple of years ago, when the Chicago Bears moved up to from 20 to 11, they gave up a first-round pick, which ended up being a top 5 pick, and the Giants got the deal. The guy who had the great moment at the draft last year. That's tough to watch, but we have Justin Fields, so it's all good. So again, like there has been a price to be paid, and if the Bears, I did want to ask you about this, because I've heard a lot of buzz about Darnell Wright, who you have going in the second round of the Arizona Cardinals at 34. And I'm thinking that if the Bears do move down, that Darnell Wright could be somebody that they're targeting. I know our own Brian Baldinger loves him, and was very effusive in praise with him a couple of days ago when we were on the Total Access together. Do you think it feels like there's some value when I'm looking at the top of your second round draft, that if the Bears were going to move down, you can move down, pick up some capital, and get a player like Darnell Wright.
Yeah, I think, again, as we've been talking about, there are guys that could easily go at 20. Darnell Wright could go at 19 to Tampa Bay if they decide to, they've already talked about potentially moving Tristan Wirfs to left tackle. We've already talked about it. So if they decide to do that, they could pick Darnell Wright at 19. Other teams that could be very interested in him at the end of the first round as well. So, if they do make a move with the Steelers or somebody at 17, if that's the guy that they really like, not a shock if they pick him. But, some teams may see him as a right tackle only, which they may not want to take at 17. They might want to wait a little bit on him. So he's one of these guys that could really – he's got a wide range to him. And I know some people love him and some people don't. So, but yeah, if they move down to 17, and if they don't want Jalen Carter or one of the other guys that falls into their lap at 9, then they're going to get a really good player at 17 at cornerback. Look, if they love Jordan Addison's a really good receiver, if they love him, corner, there's a bunch of options at that part of the draft. And Kalijah Cansey, a defensive tackle.
Yes.
If you want,
I like Kalijah Cansey.
Great pieces, some very good players available at 17 for him.
Yeah, I just think it's really going to depend on how many quarterbacks end up going, and if there is one that's kind of just hanging out. If you got and maybe there's a team that is in love with Will Levis,
right?
And else, then you want to jump ahead and get someone like that, or even Hendon Hooker. I mean, recency bias, I think, has really, it's not in his favor at all. And I'm not saying that he deserves to go in the top 10 necessarily, but I mean, this is a guy, he was on a tear for Tennessee before he tore his ACL. Yeah. But I think because that was so long ago, we forget that he had taken a huge step forward at the beginning of this past season.
He did, but nobody was talking about him as a top 10 pick, even at his zenith. That was not the competition. He's very much reminds me of what Geno Smith did at West Virginia. I think he's really more in that range.
So does he just take 5 to 7 years in the league?
I say when he's 33, he's going to kill it.
Right? I mean, look. But that said, there have been guys. Kenny Pickett is a very good example, who was considered a 3rd-round pick, something like that, comes out, gets picked in the top 20. So, Hooker could easily go if Tampa Bay. I think they're going to stick with Kyle Trask. I'm not sure why, but that's my guess. And Baker. So that's my guess of what's going to happen.
And Baker, I don't think they're going to stick
Vikings, depending on what the Ravens, right? What happens with the Ravens. So, but at 9, I think Will Levis is a real possibility. Somebody like the Vikings, somebody like that. And we just saw this last year, right? You wouldn't think, they're not going to trade within the division. Oh, that just happened last year between Minnesota and Detroit.
It's been happening all offseason between the NFC North. Are you kidding?
Yeah, right.
They are not afraid to trade with each other.
Nobody cares. That's right. Whatever.
So, it's really going to be quarterbacks. And then the other thing, again, Carter's a really interesting thing because he's so talented that somebody in the middle of that first round's like, look, we would never get an opportunity for this guy in a normal situation. So let's take advantage of it. Let's go up and get him at 9 or 10 and, just try to do our best to make him the best player he can be.
Yeah, that's a huge hope too. And again, that would cost probably a 1st-round pick next year. If it is for Jalen Carter or somebody like that, or one of the quarterbacks, could definitely be a thing. And by the way, if they drop to 17, 19, we have players like Broderick Jones, Nolan Smith, who I like a lot out of Georgia. Or even if they want to, go wide receiver, you have Jordan Addison there going at 21 to the LA Chargers. So a lot of possibilities. So it's not the end of the world that they do drop back. But again, it'll be interesting to see the evaluation they've given to Jalen Carter should he fall. How about another question there, Sammy? I got to get my old man readers out again. Shouldn't any quarterback be successful with a good offensive line, running game, and weapons? I mean, I don't know. There are some quarterbacks who are better than others. They obviously are at a top level, making it to the NFL, but you still there's differences between Patrick Mahomes and Trask. You know what I'm saying? There are going to be some differences.
Yeah, I mean, look, Kansas City Chiefs were fine with Alex Smith, but Patrick Mahomes kind of taking it to another level.
Yeah, that's a good example.
And it's but in the other situation, let's take the Philadelphia Eagles when Carson Wentz kind of took over that team a few years ago, right? There is a certain level of talent where it is true that you need, if you have the receivers in the line and everything, yes, you should be able to be successful. But
look at the Niners.
It's not any quarterback, but but the thing is, it's even more than that. It's really about the entire situation that a quarterback comes into. If Zach Wilson goes to another team and doesn't play for a year or two, could be a totally different book we're writing about that guy. Aaron Rodgers didn't have to play for 3 years. We could be, if he goes number 1 to the 49ers.
He goes to San Francisco,
Right. I mean, you don't know what the situation is going to be.
What does Alex Smith look like if he doesn't play for 3 years and he comes in Green Bay?
Yeah. So circumstances are big. Yeah,
that has to do too with the coordinator and how willing they are to tailor their system and tweak their own system that's worked for them based on the personnel and the quarterback that they get.
Wait a minute.
A ton of quarterbacks that have.
You're most supposed to fit your scheme to your players, not your players to your team. That's how that works. Really?
It's a novel concept, isn't it?
It's my way or the highway has always worked in the NFL.
Don't get me started.
Undefeated.
Days on that.
Well, Lamar Jackson might be the best example of this of all time, because nobody took a chance on that dude where he should have gone in the top half of the first round, because they didn't want to change their system to fit what he's best at. And the Ravens, well, first they took Hayden Hurst at 25, which didn't make any sense to me. But then they made the decision to go up and get that fifth year at number 32, right? And Greg Roman came in, and they made the offense work for him, and he's been fantastic. So, it's so much.
Jalen Hurts is another great example. Like Nick Sirianni building that system, and like that entire Eagles staff building the system around Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, right.
And being able to, and like you saw it, like the back half of last or 2 seasons ago was when it started to click, and then lo and behold, they make a Super Bowl this year.
And the biggest name of all time, who's you could call a quote system quarterback, Joe Montana. Joe Montana was not highly regarded as a draft pick. Bill Walsh comes out of a vertical school with Don Coryell, but he sees what Montana can do. He sees what his team can do. Creates the West Coast offense to meet Joe Montana's skill set. Yep. And, one of the best marriages of quarterbacks and coaches of all time. So,
oh my gosh. If my dad could be alive to hear this conversation, he hated Joe Montana. He hated that. He never, like the whole thing, like with Arlington Heights that's going on. If my dad was still around, he was like, Fairweather died in '88 when that soft ass Joe Montana came in here and beat the Bears. And I'm like, he did play at Notre Dame, Dad. And he's like, whatever. But in any event, he would be loving that little comp right there. So shout out to my pops. How about another question? Okay. Keith, this is a lot of words. Panthers pick Young, which puts Texans in a cluster because Stroud has the same agent as Deshaun Watson. Knowing that, they probably won't draft Stroud. Oh, my gosh. Is that true? Will they not draft Stroud because of the agent situation?
I think a lot of people say that, but I don't think that's the case. I think you take the player that you want and you move on from that, I think. Now, again, as I mentioned, Anthony Richardson's a very interesting prospect. I'll be very interested if they make that call. And you would typically say, "Oh no, Stroud's a much better player." Blah 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 blah. Well, guess who?
What?
Look, I don't know why teams don't like Ohio State quarterbacks. Maybe they haven't had the greatest success in the world,
Well, hold on. I got to point out before you do that.
Should have been picked earlier than he was. Justin Fields should have been picked earlier, and
yes.
So hopefully Stroud won't run into that. The Texans will take him, and it's fine. But sometimes teams do that stuff.
I will tell you this, and the whole thing. So the previous Ohio State quarterback to be drafted in the first round before Justin Fields was Dwayne Haskins.
Yeah,
which might have been a risk or a little bit too early by Washington.
Yeah.
The next quarterback who is from Ohio State to be drafted in the first round was Art Schlichter.
Yeah.
In the 80s or 70s or whatever, the 60s, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it was before Elway. Like he was so old, like he's older than John Elway. Like that's how long it had been. So it was so ridiculous to go out there and be like, well, Ohio State quarterbacks, people do that. Ohio State quarterbacks, am I right? I'm like, okay, well, look at the quarterbacks that Ryan Day has been recruiting, starting with Joe Burrow. So
I was going to say, you got to include Joe Burrow in that conversation.
Oh, yeah,
people don't, but
I do.
Yeah.
So you had Burrow. Yeah, so Burrow's in there with Justin Fields. Now CJ Stroud. Once CJ Stroud hits, then that narrative can die forever. Kind of like the USC wide receivers. Like, nobody wanted USC wide receivers, and then Amon-Ra St. Brown has finally been the final nail in the coffin of that
narrative.
Don't
I think
scout the uniform, scout the player. They've been saying it for years, and teams are starting to do it a little bit more even than they were before. I mean, they're trying to get over that. It's sort of a Moneyball thing in football, honestly. Like if you watch the scene in Moneyball where all the scouts are talking about the guy's girlfriend and all this stuff of reasons that to be a prospect, a lot of conversations in the football world were not significantly different than that. And I think they're starting to really move away from that and really focus on, more of what matters.
Yes. And all that, for whatever reason, all the Moneyball clips have been popping up on my TikTok. So I've been basically rewatching the movie, which, by the way, if I can point out, that movie skips the best part of that whole season, the Angels winning the World Series. Oakland won 22 consecutive games, and they gained two games on the Angels, who went 19-2 during that stretch. I might be getting the particulars wrong, but it was something like that. I'm benevolent enough to see if there's one more question. I'm going to keep Chad late just because I feel like it. I was late to start this because I finally switched to this iPhone, and were the Bears in on Okudah? Ooh, Justin Fields storming. I don't know. I didn't hear anything like that. It didn't cost a lot to get him. Did you hear anything about that too?
Yeah, I think with the injury, I would doubt it. I would doubt it. I mean, I think it just wasn't working in Detroit. They offloaded him for a ham sandwich. I just think the injury kind of robbed him. And you don't know what you're going to get with them. So my guess is that if there were a lot of phone calls, they would have gotten more than a 5th-round pick for him. So I really –
and he went to Carolina, right?
Yeah. No, Atlanta. Yeah.
Atlanta.
Maybe the Bears called and offered him a 7th or something, but I can't imagine they would.
I don't know that you would have even gone that. I mean, he was PFF's 77th rated corner out of 81 last year, and it was – he needed a fresh start somewhere, but I just don't think that the Bears would have been the one to give it to him. And he was guaranteed so much money then, and then you have to figure out what to do with his option.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's not smart money, and that doesn't fit the Bears MO.
But it's almost becoming like the NBA now with these trades in terms of like trying to make the cap work and all that stuff. It's not as simple as it used to be.
That's a great call. And it's such a bummer because, like, Jeff Okudah, such a great prospect coming out, and you're super bummed that it never worked out. We never got to see, even, that he was playing for Detroit. I mean, as a human being, I wanted him to go out there and play to the best of his ability. I think we all did. And
that's what I've always said about you, Adam, that you're a great human being.
I'm not. No, that's the problem. This is one time that I'm actually okay. Like, but it's a bummer. Like, he was a great player at Ohio State. So you like seeing him. You wanted to see him go out there.
He's still good. Like Atlanta's loaded up on defense too, so he's
that's good. That's a good
down there. So
I like that they're going YOLO and they're bringing in a lot of guys like Calais Campbell and players like that, and really making a run for it. And it really kind of opens them up. And if we're looking, I'm just going to take a peek real quick at who you had. Yeah, you had Tyree Wilson going to them.
Right, and like it's wide open in the NFC, right? In the NFC South, it's wide open. In the NFC, it's wide open.
Especially
so making all the moves and see what happens.
All right, Chad. So you have your 7-round mock draft coming out. When does that drop?
It's usually the Friday before the draft.
Okay.
Yep. So
we'll check for that. Friday before the draft, you can go to NFL.com. You can find his 4-round mock draft right now. He's helping out with all the draft coverage and everything. And then we're gonna be golfing soon. I'm putting. By the way, I'm putting together your bag.
Okay.
The driver. I got an awesome Strixon driver for you. The putter, It's a Cleveland, and the wedges are amazing. Your irons might suck, but
that's pretty much how my game goes, so that's fine. I'm not particular. I'll be happy out in the sunshine. I've also got an article coming out tomorrow, 2 ideal picks for each team.
Oh,
and
fun.
Another one coming out next week about the most pivotal spots in the first round. So go check out our stuff. We've got all kinds of great stuff from Daniel Jeremiah, Lance Zierlein, the whole crew. So, check out NFL.com.
But Chad's the only one who answers my calls. No, I'm not. I'm joking. Daniel's very nice, but I saw his Tuesday schedule and we're like, yeah, dude, I'm not going to. But in any event, we're glad to have you on. We appreciate it. Maybe we'll be able to squeeze you in one more time before you get out of here. We can both sit in one of those empty offices in the building and just have a laugh.
Apparently, Carmen, am I supposed to take that I wasn't Adam's first choice for this podcast? Is that?
Yeah, I mean that's what I got from it. You were my first choice. I was very excited you were coming on when I was going to be on. So,
well, in fairness, DJ doesn't root for the Packers, so yeah, I'll tell you. Listen, I'm nobody's first choice in anything. I just kind of wait. Like the only reason I just outlasted everybody at the NFL Network. Right. They're like, fine, put them on Total Access, like whatever.
It's all good, man. I appreciate you having me on.
Listen. My spot at the NFL Network is only secure until Kyle Brandt wants to move back to California. So I understand how that goes. But no, I've had a lot of fun with you. I look forward to seeing you. I'll be in the office on Thursday and Friday. I'll be on Total Access this week. So we'll catch up and then we'll figure out when we're going to go golf. So get out of here. Sounds good. Do what you got to do. Have a good evening. And there he goes, the great Chad Reuter. NFL.com. Follow him on Twitter and everything like that. Carmen, what do you got coming up?
Kind of a lot. I'm doing a Choose Your Own Adventure article about the Bears coming out either tomorrow or Thursday. So it's going to be like if you read your kids, Choose Your Own Adventure books, if you remember those from when you were a kid and you skip ahead to, whatever choice you make. I'm doing one of those. So I think it'd be fun. But we're also going to be doing a Twitter Spaces on Thursday, talking about NFL topics and the draft and all that wonderful thing, all those wonderful things with one of my other writers at Fox, like from a kind of national perspective. And I should be having me and David Hellman will have another mock draft coming our way quite soon.
Oh, I can't wait for that. All right. So check that out. Well, I appreciate you being here. Again, apologies for the delay. Hopefully that won't happen again, but you never know. It's me, so it probably will. But anyways, thanks for being here. And you know what? I'll just send this up right now. So thanks for being here. Until next time, bear down. And Sammy, go ahead and play us out.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with Adam Rank on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.